Marcelo.
Together with that. Please come on.
Okay. Friend.
Can you start?
It's a video.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to introduce him?
Yeah, I do it. Good afternoon for all. Good afternoon. No, I thought that you were taking a photo.
And the camera.
You should take a photo too. I take a photo.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Then I take a
Yes, now I have prepared something, sorry, for my distraction. The moment is very...
That was cute.
Yes, absolutely. No, stay here.
Of course.
Okay. Good afternoon for all. And it's my pleasure to introduce you Adilson, our Adilson Cabral, Dr. Adilson Cabral, our 2022 Fulbright visiting professor. He's a faculty member in the Department of Social Communication at the graduate program in Media and Everyday Life at the University Federal Fluminense in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro, where I taught about 2 decades ago. He teaches courses on communication policies and community communication. Since 2016, he has conducted research for the Community Broadcast Policies Project, looking at sustainability and community radio and television, the implication for social movement, and the importance of this system in the larger media environment. His writing during this time has also been the relationship between community media and social political movement. I, Marcelo, have known Adilson since a long time ago. He was still an undergraduate student, and his work was outstanding in its academic rigor and engagement. You know?
Thank you very
please
much.
let them know that I'm telling the truth. Adilson, be welcome to UT community, hook and horn, and let's help us to keep Austin weird. Okay. And please join me in welcoming our Fulbright visiting professor as member of the LLILAS family in fall 2022 and forever.
Okay, thank you, Marcelo, for the word. It's a pleasure to be introduced by him because we've been talking a long time ago, and then we lost
relationship.
Yeah, we lost contact, and then it's a great pleasure to see him again here, and then have some chat, hanging up, and putting the talk, updating the talk. Okay, so here, of course, he took 5 of my time in relation to my introduction. It's good because all the surnames here are related to the project that I'm developing during this fall, this season. And then we started talking with Luis, that's there, okay, and Paloma about first lecture, I guess, I hope, lecture about my research that is related to an issue that comes from the present days. My research is related to the 2000s, is related to the time of the progressive governments and the first wave of progressive governments in Latin America. And then this question is related to the movements, the political movements that are going on just right now, just in the times of since 2019 to now, this year. So I'll introduce some aspects of my research before beginning the presentation itself. It's important to understand, I don't know how many of you are familiarized with communication issues, with the communication as a field and the relation with communication and policies and politics, and also the communication policy itself. But the idea is to understand communication, this field of communication in relation to the idea that it's an important sector for the economy. I guess everybody knows it, but strictly connected with public policies. There is the idea that communication is an important strategic area for, and there comes my supervisor. I'll wait a bit for him to enter, and okay, Good afternoon, Joe.
Hello, sorry about being late.
Okay, just in time, just in time. And then this mix in relation to the economy and public policies. My research team is about public policies of the community broadcast sector, as Paixão introduced you, during the progressive governments in Latin America in the 2000s. Of course, it has a past, and you have it's updated just right now because of the movements and the political movements, and also the media reform movements in Latin America. But it's important to understand this connection with the theme of this lecture and my research as a whole. But why am I studying in Austin, in US, this theme? Because it's related to Latin America, it's related to a situation that's very specific, but of course, you know, and also as Traubhaar is a kind of reference in this area, there are many American researchers, US researchers, that are interested in relation to communication policies and public policies in relation to media, broadcasting, such things, not only in Brazil, but also Latin America, different countries. And also, it's interesting, and I'm reaching this point, these references. There are many people here that study the situation there. And it's very interesting to understand, to make these comparisons in relation to the opportunity that we have to go to another country, and then to have to try to understand the situation and make the big picture of the connections in relation to public policies. And the second point is related to the influence of the US, and then some aspects in relation to the international policies that US have in relation to Latin America. So I'm trying to build this great picture, not only in 4 or 5 months, but during my research. And specifically, I'll try to make this picture in the research in relation to the 2000s governments in Latin America. There is a relation, of course, as I told you, in relation to the general policies and specifically with the communication policies. I'll try to understand also how in these policies they build this picture or this organization of the free systems based policy. That's the state one, the private, and in some cases the community one, or the profit, non-private, profit private and the non-profit private sector, as we'll see, and their uses. And then the debates in each country of these 5, this new, where there are leftist governments just right now, some debates and perspectives in relation to the communication policy. So let's begin with this introduction with Argentina. Argentina, we are right now with the president that's very contested, Alberto Fernandez, right there in 2019. He was elected, and his vice president is Cristina Kirchner, that was a former president. And she was the one, she was in the presidency, she had courage to approve the law of the broadcasting communication services in 2009. That's a reference for all Latin America, because it was like the first one to face the problem of concentration. After Cristina lost the election, Cristina Kirchner lost the election for Mauricio Macri, president from the right-wing perspective, and he, in the first month, he changed the political agenda in relation to this law and changed these two boards, two bodies in relation to the communication policy in Argentina into this one that is functioning till now. That's ENACOM, the National Communications Entity. But the structure of the law was based in these two ones that were more related to a democratic perspective. So this is one of the aspects that are going on right now. The structure of the laws there, they have this general broadcasting communications services law on 2009 and the information and communication technologies law in 2014. And then in this law of 2009, this law established free management providers that are states, this one I mentioned, profit private and the non-profit private, based on the structure of distributions of licenses, who are eligible in these systems of communication. State and non-state public entities. That's a very curious aspect because it's public, but it's not part of the state. And then the other ones, visible or the existence of private law or with or without profit ends that make these differences between the profit private and non-profit private. And this is the aspect, the interesting aspect of this law, that's to understand the non-state public law entities that are that consists in national universities, institutes of these universities, native people, how they are organized, maybe an association, and for the Catholic Church itself. And so it's interesting. It's an aspect of the law. Okay, after Cristina Kirchner and then Mauricio Macri and then now Aurelio Fernandes, the situation of the debates about communication policy there in Argentina they have these three main topics: law on convergent communication that tries to bring and to update the aspects of the law of 2009 and bring also the law of 2014. Internet and mobile telephony as public services and also system by cable or satellite as audiovisual services, because this idea of service is related to the whole of the state for the whole population, and so to a kind of connection with the idea of the right to communicate and the communication rights. So it's very important for them. They don't have this idea just right now, this concept based on the law, to establish not only internet and mobile telephony, but systems by cable or satellite as services. And so to introduce this as a structure of their communication policies. Okay. Then we have Bolivia. Bolivia, the new president since 2020 is Luis Arce. That's a candidate for a former president, Evo Morales, very known for all, that he signed in 2019 because of the almost a coup or a mobilization of the society there that was the president after Evo Morales was self-declared, Janine Áñez. They have a structure, an interesting structure related to communication, and is one of the countries also, with Argentina, Ecuador, Uruguay, and Venezuela, the ones of the scope of these progressive governments in 2000s that advanced with the more democratic communication laws. But in this structure, they have a Vice Ministry of Communication, the ATT, that's an agency, a board, regulatory board for not only telecommunications, but technologies, information and communication technologies. And they have these two, one committee and one council. The committee is related to the proposal of policies and development plans, and the council is related to the articulation of the state and society. So it's very interesting to see the structure, not only based on a regulatory board that's out of the executive. They have these laws also, the general law of telecommunications and the law, a specific one, that's a law of adjustment of broadcasters, that it's more connected to the broadcasting service, and then the general law of telecommunications, very similar to the Brazilian one, that's a big Brazilian code of telecommunications, and then broadcast is inside. In these laws, they have the idea of equitable and efficient use of the radio spectrum in national level. So the understanding of this distribution of the total channels of the frequency bands in 4 subdivisions, but at the same time understanding this principle of equitability, of equity, but the 4 subdivisions that are different from the Argentina project are state, private business, with 33 each, 33 of the whole spectrum. That's finite. It's not. It has some borders, some aspect that has to be controlled, to be regulated. And then the other 2 ones are social community up to 17, and the 4th one, indigenous native people and land workers, and also indigenous native peoples and land workers, intercultural and Afro-Bolivian communities. This sector, society sector, they have also 17% of the spectrum. So it's based on a 4 sectors system in relation to this division. Okay, and then the debates. They have debates for now. That's the idea of to understand how they deal with license renewal. With this law, it's unclear in relation to the aspects of the law, how they offer for the interested people, the organizations and the companies, how they offer the idea, the clear, transparent idea that these licenses can be renewed. The second aspect, challenge to guarantee plurality and diversity. Is there a role for the government? There is a great discussion there about this idea of how to guarantee plurality and diversity in relation to that distribution of 17 and 17 for social community and the people, the organized people, some different sectors of the society, how to establish and to guarantee this plurality and diversity in relation to the distribution. And the third one is participation, exactly the participation in the decision-making process, because they have a committee, they have a council, but what are the places for the civil society or the social organizations in relation to the decision-making process? So it's complicated. There they are dealing with this process, and then some kind of communication democratization movement going on, mainly with the people that are organized around these licenses, not only with radio, TV initiatives, but also the internet initiatives. And then there comes
The president is in the Time Covered magazine today.
Oh, yeah.
and then let's talk about Texas. No, I'm just kidding. You know that. No. Okay. Chile. You know the problem is in relation to that joke about the Chilean flag and the Texan flag. In reality, they took the idea of the Polonia flag, but the Polski flag, because they put this blue square and then the sky, the star, the white star, just because of Poland. But okay, Chile. Now the brand new president there, Gabriel Boric, in in March 2022, and the previous one was the most unpopular president since 1990, when democracy was restored in Chile, Gabriel Sebastián Piñera, and then he made possible this social outburst, that is the estallido social, que Paloma está aqui, and they are calling for a new constitution that's about to be approved next week, I guess. I forgot the days actually, but it's next week they will approve the constitution, and they were elected in a basis of this great social movement. They have an interesting structure because Chile is not placed in the pack of their progressive governments in the 2000s, but at the same way they have an interesting structure based on the executive. There is a Ministry of Transports and Telecommunications, and then telecommunications is like inside or in the same perspective of the infrastructure. We have a subsecretary of telecommunications, and they have a National Council of Television, not about communication as a whole, but specifically on television. They have three laws, one general law of telecommunication, one specific for community radios, and one specific in 2014 about digital television. And this law is interesting because they have this mention: all the inhabitants of the Republic will have free and equal access to telecommunication. And then there's an expression in relation to the policies that's related to the aspect of the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, based on the public access that we have in U.S. We don't have in Brazil. The Brazilian Constitution doesn't allow, and the laws related to communication there, they don't allow the public access. If I want to ask for a license, I can't. I need to be organized in an association, institutionalized association, and then ask for a license. But I cannot do it by myself. And then it's allowed in Chile and other countries. Any person will be able to apply for concessions and permit in the form of and conditions established by law. Okay. The radio spectrum is a national asset whose domain belongs to the entire nation. Okay. But look at the community radio. Up to 25 watts with 18 meters from the antenna height. In Brazil, we say that in Brazil we have a specific law of community radio, And we say that, used to say that this law is the no law. Is the idea that of how not to do or how not to deal with community radio, because it's based on a limit of 25 watts of power and 30 meters. I don't know yet how to convert the meters from miles and other things, but 18 meters is worse than in Brazil. And the exception, in rural areas, we can think about or get a license for 4 meters. A place for the transmitter can be at a height of 40 meters. So it's better, but just considering rural areas. But the country itself, 18 meters is very, very, very low. Okay, the debate's right there, and in relation to the Constitution, in relation to the coalition of movements around, in relation to the communication issues. One, the idea of a community media system to be recognized in a future law or by future public policies in relation to the everyday regulation of the process there, the community giving licenses for them. If public access is considered, then there should be a good part of the spectrum. Institutional framework for technological media convergence, updating the existing law of 1982 in relation to the new scenario, and to think communication in this convergence perspective, and the recognition of digital common goods, to understand digital technologies as goods, reinforce a culture of belonging and the commitment against concentration, just like the Bolivian, the idea that they are developing in Argentina, to understand the services regarding communication as goods for the people. Let's go to Colombia. Gustavo Petro was also elected on August 2022, the new one, and then they are making kind of a connection between Colombia and Chile. They call it Petro-Boric connection. That's interesting, the possibilities of interchange among between these two countries. In Colombia, he was the first left-wing president of the history, and the previous one was Ivan Duque with 9 press conferences, but more than $10 million in official advertising. That is the balance in relation to the use that the president had with the media and the budgets related to the media that the government had. And then this is an issue, interesting issue, to put the idea that media and communication are topics to be discussed. In Colombia, they have a structure also involving a Ministry of Information and Communication Technologies. They have a Commission on Communication Regulation and a Commission of specific on television that regulates television policies. They have a law on information and communication technologies. This structure, they established an agency to regulate the spectrum, and there are open possibilities for citizens or national legal persons to ask for licenses there. But at the same time, no. In Colombia is interesting because they have 4,000 community televisions there. But at the same time, that's the point, the distribution of the power is very unbalanced. There is a great asymmetry in relation to the big communication companies and the community television, of course. And the participation of foreign investments that they have also mentioned in the law of 2009, and the screen quota for national programs that we in Brazil we just mentioned it in the pay TV law in 2011, and there is a great discussion about this because the companies that are out of Brazil, out of the countries of Latin America, they try to enforce the participation in the whole setup of the programs, and it's very complicated for the national and regional markets in relation to independent production, such things. Okay. The debates there are related to a convergent regulation for the telecommunication and ICT sectors, a strong body that they want to establish. In accordance, they have this connection with OCDE recommendations. A national agency for communication regulation, not only for relation to the television, to update this split in relation to the Commission of Communication and the Authority for Television. They're trying to develop a big national agency for communication, and it's interesting because here they are trying to establish as a democratic perspective, and then in Argentina, ENACOM is very putting in discussion in relation to the social organization there and the researchers also, because they ENACOM make bring weakness to the sector in relation to what AFSCA and the other authority they were developing. But in this situation, the agency would be interesting to bring the best of each body. Decentralization of the Ministry of Telecommunications and Information and Communication Technologies, and the empowerment of the media, of the community media, in order to facilitate the social appropriation of public policies. Okay, they have 4,000 community televisions, but there is a need to bring some sustainability perspective for them, and then to make possible some kind of influence or relation to the whole perspective of using communication. Then Colombia, and then the fifth one, that's Peru. Peru, the new president was elected last year in July, Pedro Castillo, and then they are trying to get to bring back certain stability in relation to the former presidents, because there was a succession of impeachments or resigns, and then the policies there, they couldn't be established, and then of course communication suffers also because of it. The structure is based also on Ministry of Transport and Communication, just like Bolivia, and then there's a consultative council, not a deliberative council, on radio and television, and this supervisory body of for private investment in telecommunication, there is OCIPTEL, that's based on telecommunications at all. It's just like a regulatory board for the whole telecommunication sector. There are two laws of reference, 2004 and 2012. And the base of this 2004 law on radio and television is that establishes the idea of the division in commercial, educational, public. Education is a very old idea in relation to the understanding that the public has to be educational. In Brazil, based on the military governments there, we have this idea of educational radio, educational television, and the idea of bringing the public back into the scene is important because public has to this understanding of broadcasting policies and broadcasting the whole of not only the state but the whole of the policies in relation to the society. So it's not only based on educational process but bringing and improving citizenship. And the community one that's mentioned in the radio and television law. Community for them in Peru means peasant, native and indigenous communities, rural areas or areas of preferential interest. So they don't have a kind of division in sectors and kind of division of the spectrum, and they don't have this kind of identification on how to bring licenses for them, how to make these regulatory aspects work exactly. So education and community services have preferential treatment. They don't say how exactly, but they such kind of limits for ownership and definitions and roles for the consultative council on radio and television. They debate now. It's interesting. Only in Peru. In Brazil we had such kind, but in Peru was very, very strong this debate related to trash TV. That's in Spanish, so I have to say, telebasura. Only in Peru they have this huge discussion in relation to the violence and obscene and explicit content during family time, and they made a great, huge mobilization of the society there to avoid this kind of content in relation to the programs and to the radio and TV programs there. Not only tele in a broadcast perspective that involves radio and television. The second theme, equity and distribution of radio and TV licenses. That's a problem everywhere. How to deal with the measures of concentration and how to avoid conglomerates and such things always happen. It's a problem in relation to the spectrum that has a limit, but also in relation to the power of digital conglomerates, and the law that they tried to approve there was criticized and denied because of limitations in its proposal, because they made what Argentina, Ecuador, Uruguay, Venezuela, what they approved in their laws, the distribution of percentage in relation to the sectors. But there was a discussion and an argument against this perspective because of the project, because the project has lots of holes and they have to discuss it a little more. And the third one aspect is related to the state policy for the commission television. Possibilities of cooptation based on political instability in Peru. That's also a problem that's mapped by the academic researchers of this area in relation to the idea that avoiding concentration and bringing to a government or a state perspective means also the idea of populism or censorship, such things, and then there's a policy that need to be balanced, as I'll explain in my conclusions. Before ending, there are yet some challenges for this field. First, the establishment of a solid structure for communication regulation able to resist as a state policy. So we have this in Argentina, we had this in Bolivia, we had this in Brazil, when a right-wing government is elected and assumes his mandate, his or her mandate, the communication policy just turned at the same time. It has no basis in relation to a more secure safety policy that can survive the mandates. Definition on what are public state or public market and community sectors in the system and their limits. Understanding that public state and community sector different from the private ones need to count with public state budget and maybe considering complementarity with the private sector and how to deal with complementarity, because it's complementarity can be equity or can be a relation of assume one in relation to another, like a chain, but the idea that there's a whole system of communication and sectors to occupy the system, to have a democratic and transparent occupation of this spectrum, or in relation to the national budget, national, regional budgets, it's also important. And the fourth one, regulating community communication specifically, that's the weakest sector, with the commitment of its viability and sustainability by the state, because it's important not only to make to approve public policies without having this commitment with the community communication sector, and improving comparative researches. That now that's our territory here. Among topics, countries and regions facing regulatory capture, that's my point, in the area, and reinforcing the idea of a democratic communication as a human right. That's why I'm here. That's why the good people are here. And some conclusions at the end. At the end, real end. No consensus in Latin America in relation to the regulatory frameworks of communication. There are some differences. There is a kind of common points, but with different aspects that need to be articulated. But there are some standards, some common definitions that can be observed, but at the same way, it's interesting to see differences. Communication is, of course, a sensitive area in different countries according to each political scenario. That's not also established. They have some kind of waves, and this idea of pink wave or pink tide is interesting because there are movements every time. And the conclusions of the comparative perspective. Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru are already facing political problems with different kinds of destabilization. Maybe because they have already more than 1 year of government, and then Peru has this kind of messy changing in relation to the presidency, but they are facing these political problems that of course has some connections with, or bring some limits to the development of democratic communication policies. And Chile and Colombia bring great expectations for the changing perspectives, but also they have to deal with political polarizations. That is an aspect, that is a component of our everyday political perspective in Latin America and maybe the whole world. So at the end, real end, some relations with progressive governments in 2000s made possible structural but unstable regulations for the broadcasting sector. So the ones who ran in the 2000s, they have some advantages. Argentina, Bolivia, in relation to the structure of the system. So they have more diversity in relation to the licenses and the projects that are going on right now in their countries. And the other ones, they have to run against the time or the possible time or the window of opportunities that they have in these left governments that they are developing. So in relation, they have this unstable regulation, but they have to be revised in terms of media convergence. And there's a need also to face some kind of, not enemies actually, but some kind of structure, some kind of company and actor that's heavier and more aggressive than the broadcast companies of the 20th century, and that's it. Thank you very much. At the end, I'm open to your questions.
Do you have time for questions?
Thank you very much, Adilson. I have a question, like, it's a very kind of like just informative or basic question. Thinking about definitions of state and democracy, when we think of these concepts in the realm of communications, and me not being an expert in the field, what or how can we problematize them in terms of new technologies? And if we think of that old idea of McLuhan that the medium is the message, and we live in an era of unregulatory media where information flows in a very deregularized manner. So how can we make the difference between dispersion and democracy? Tackle problems that are going to affect the nation versus dispersing possibilities of change. I think this is one of the challenges of our new century.
That's very, very interesting point. When I was looking in the beginning of the research, I was looking for your name and I tried some research. I thought, we have some kind of connections in relation to our researches, and then you bring just the point. It's very, very interesting because in relation to these 5 countries, and then if we bring also Uruguay, Venezuela, and Ecuador, and Brazil, of course, and mainly this country, and Mexico, of course, there is a need to understand the public sphere and the places for deliberation of policies, not only based on communication, but based on the idea of bringing and affirming human rights that have to be established among the political forces. I don't want to be kind of naive. Of course, there are kind of polarizations, ideological projects, and ideological forces that don't have a place for consensus. But at the same time, the conciliatory perspective has to be developed in relation to the actors involved. So communication policy is too much complicated. For instance, in Brazil, when Lula tries during this this campaign to bring the idea of regulatory media, media regulation, it's a kind of problem because he doesn't need to do it. Because it's a very sensitive issue to deal during the campaign. But the society has to be involved on a debate that has to be some kind of literacy for the whole society, and specifically for the ones that are trying to get involved, and then to reshape also the field of communication in the universities, because we give professionals for the markets, for the professional areas in different places. So it's important to rebuild, reshape the kind of debate, and like to solve or to confront this idea of if you're private, then you have profits, then you concentrate, then you don't bring or don't improve plurality and diversity and equity. Or if you're public in relation to the state, you're a populist, and then you bring everything to the perspective of your government, and then these two perspectives, these two ways of dealing with communication, they don't work exactly. So it has to be solved. Okay, Federico?
I have a question about Bolivia. Sector 3 and Sector 4 don't seem to be mutually exclusive. Is that true? How do they deal with the overlap between Sector 3 of community and Sector 4 that has all of these other...
Yeah, two things about it. One, that's the reason why this is an issue for them, and then the debate is going on right now. And two, this is related to the movements, to the specific movements that try to bring some focus to their organizations and to their areas. So social community is like for everybody. We are organized on certain bases that have to be established and very visualized, viewed in the design of the law, so that we can have this kind of this part of this whole spectrum for us. But how they regulate itself, it's very complicated, because it's complicated everywhere. If we don't have a strong body with transparency and with councils where people are involved and there are connections between social organizations and the population at all. So it's complicated to make this everyday policy in relation to the distribution, and then to understand this division of 33, and 17. It's complicated. So,
sure. Actually, now well, I've got two questions. One that kind of follows Federico's, but I think the bigger picture, when I want to follow a little what Adela was asking. So
I mean, when you look at when new technologies come in, like streaming TV, I mean, even places like Australia got taken by surprise because they originally said, oh, this is a technology company, we don't really need to regulate any sense of content. And then they suddenly realized, hold it, it's actually film, television, etc. And so I think a lot of places are still scrambling now to figure out what to do about that. So, and there's a couple of arenas. One is kind of quota type content regulation, like the EU is doing. They're applying their TV quotas to Netflix. Another is kind of more what Brazil does, promoting production, like with production subsidy, but then tying it to being picked up by the industry, which is, I think in Brazil sort of works. But I get the sense that these kinds of things are still being applied in a really traditional way to cable TV or to film. And so how do you see the countries reacting now to this really substantial new medium, not just Netflix, but all the others now?
TikTok.
Well,
TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok and YouTube. I mean, that's a really interesting question. Do you put them into the same?
And that's why the new candidates came to place too.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so old, I don't see TikTok as media, but you're right.
Well, there's a really interesting question. Are they social media? They kind of are. Or are they audiovisual television media?
Right.
They are that too, actually. So yeah, there's all kinds of kind of what category do things go into? But what do you think, or what's the picture you see that, as you look at now at kind of policy being put into place by current governments, I didn't hear that they were addressing this issue much in your roundup. How do you see countries trying to address the question of the power of streaming and the need to regulate streaming? Including YouTube, probably.
I think it's a great problem that they are dealing because this distinction between what's finite in relation to the spectrum, and then the finite perspective of then developing a service based on broadcast, on streaming and VOD, video over demand, and OTT services such like these systems. They are based more in private, corporative, conglomerate services like Disney, Amazon, Apple, Globo in Brazil, and in relation to the platform, in relation to the support where these companies are based, they don't have a possible regulation. But if we think about what's a company and a national company and which kind of profits or benefits they will have or not, which kind of budget in relation to contents they will have. So I think that the discussion, of course, the platform, the support is different, but there are some kinds of needed of issues, of aspects to be regulated. The support for independent production, regional production, national production in relation to the conglomerates that Europe is trying to do, European Union is trying to deal with some kind of processes like this. And I think that the debate goes on because there is a change of platforms, but in relation to the whole of the state, in relation to the improvement of national, regional contents, there is a need to the more participation of the state. But in the same way, as you know, you kind of follow this, our field of political economy of communication is they are observing, they are mapping this, and then the state is very weak in relation to the regulation because of the capture, not only in relation to the general policy, but in relation to the telecommunication policy. So it's up to us.
It's time for your class.
It's time for my class.